today is going to be all about the pictures. So you might want to sit near the front where you can see them. They're going to be sort of intricate, little things like that. So feel free to get up and move, because I'm going to talk about different places. And so we're today talking about sort of geography and customs. I'm going to try and get in your mind a few things. So general things about the land of Israel, and then specifically the temple and Jerusalem. And then we'll talk just a little bit about customs, including eating and crucifixion. What a weird mix. But the whole purpose of this class, we're talking about the world of the New Testament. So this is the age and the place where God chose to send his Son. And so for us to understand really what's going on in the New Testament, we have to understand that world. So much, when we understand that context, and you know what York says, context is everything, and there's a historical context, there's a geographical context, there's a religious context, and all of that comes to bear on our understanding of the Scripture. So when you read like the exchange between Jesus and the Samaritan woman, first of all, what's the religious context there? Jesus is a Jew, she's a Samaritan. If you don't know anything about Judaism and the Samaritan religion, you're going to miss half the conversation. Because she says, our fathers say we should worship in this mountain. Your fathers say Jerusalem. What about it? Okay, there's a religious context that you've got to understand, even get what is she asking. And the New Testament's full of stuff like that. In Luke chapter 1, when the angel appears to Zechariah, it says that he was a priest of the order of Abijah. Okay, what does that mean? If you don't know something about the way that the priests are organized, that detail just goes right over you. Now, all this stuff is knowable. Now that's the thing. It's not that it's so obscure we don't know what this means. That's almost never the case. But we do have to study, we do have to dig, we have to look at that context. So usually I'm teaching the Bible, but in this class I'm teaching the context of the Bible. And the whole purpose is so that you might understand the Bible. So get that. I'm not, you could go to Harvard or Princeton or any place like that, and they would have a class much like this talking about the world of the Bible, but the world of the New Testament, but with a different purpose. I want you to know the world of the New Testament so that you might know and actually believe the New Testament. I think knowing this context helps you. So we're just going to look through several things about the world of the New Testament that I think is good for you to know. The very first thing is you really need to get in your mind the layout of the land of Israel. And you can do that. If you have a Bible, it's got maps in the back. You can buy a Bible atlas. So I brought a few things to show you today that I want to recommend to you. And here's one of them. So first of all, if you have the ESV study Bible, it's a phenomenal study Bible. I think it's the best study Bible there is out there. It's full of maps and charts and historical charts, just a lot of things like that do give you that context. My favorite Bible atlas is the IVP Atlas of Bible History. And this has, it's just a lot of good information about what's going on in the world of the Bible. Maps, so like, you want to talk about Jesus' journeys, there's a picture of Herodian, one of Herod's palaces. It's actually where he was buried. A few people here have been there and made that walk up to the top with me. Herodian's one of my favorite places. Almost no tours go there. It's weird. I don't think I've ever been there, and there was another tour group there, but I always take my groups there. It's down on the West Bank, and that's one reason why groups don't go to it. but it's a really important place, Herodian. So IVP Atlas gives you just lots of great information. There's Cave 4 from Qumran, where they found the bulk of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So like here's a map, Mary and Joseph, their travel, what it would have been like to come from Nazareth down to Bethlehem, shows their trek. So a good Bible atlas that just shows you maps is really important. But the easiest and the best thing is to get in your mind a general layout of the land of Israel. And that's what this map is that I've put up there. They're just a few geographical features that if you'll get them in your mind, and anytime you're reading a story in the Bible and it tells you where it is, you want to sort of locate it there. So even if you've never been to Israel, there's a way you can sort of understand that. And you want to think about the basic land of Israel as in three parts, all right? And this map has them shaded in the black and the gray, all right? So the over, as you're looking at it, on the left side, or this part right here, this is all the Mediterranean Sea. So you need to know that Israel, this is the coastline. So out here's the Mediterranean. You'll notice Israel has no natural harbor. There's no port. I read the biography of, what's his name, the guy that wrote It Is Well With My Soul, Spafford. Horatio Spafford and his wife Anna, and when they, by the way, they became terrible heretics. It's a terrible story, but just very disturbing. But when they moved to Israel, they were part of this sort of apocalyptic cult. They eventually became. He wasn't that when he wrote that hymn, but they became that. And when they would go to Joppa, and they would literally have to jump off the boat out. And they would have little boats to then bring them to shore. And they would tender them in. There was no harbor in Israel at all. In the Herod, see this spot right here? That's Caesarea. So Herod figures out a way to give them a port. And he literally, they pour concrete that they then sink to the bottom, so that the bottom is smooth, and they put a breakwater out there. They build a breakwater up out in the Mediterranean, so ships can then sail behind the breakwater and come into port. And Caesarea becomes Israel's only port. Not long after the time of Jesus, there's a terrible earthquake that pretty much destroys it. And so they didn't have it very long, but they did for a while. So you need to know that Israel's bordered over there on the west by the Mediterranean. And so then, see this black part of Israel, that's called the coastal plain. Now, it's basically flat land, or it's coming down. So the central part here, this is called the Central Highlands. And it is the Central Mountain Range. All right, so it's all hilly. And then the black streak right down the middle is the Jordan Valley. All right, so up in the top, way up here, here's Mount Hermon, and it's 2,800 meters high. So what is that? 7,500 feet, something like that. So it's a tall mountain. Kentucky's highest mountain, Black Mountain, which is 4,000 feet. That's our highest one. So Mount Hermon is high enough. It gets snow-capped, and you can see it. It dominates pretty much anywhere down in if you're standing down in the Jordan Valley, you look to the north on a clear day, you can see Mount Hermon. And the springs of Dan, so the tribe of Dan had got the north part of Israel, and the springs of Dan in Hebrew is Jordan, and so that becomes, we call it Jordan. So they flow out of basically the base of Mount Hermon. You see the little spring right there, and then you've got the Sea of Galilee. It's 600 feet below sea level. In fact, the whole Jordan Valley is below sea level. Comes down into the Dead Sea that is now 1,300 feet below sea level. And then down here, this is all desert. Now, this Jordan Valley, if you look at a globe and you look down into Africa, you see straight below this, straight south of this, is the Great Rift Valley. And this is the northern end of the Great Rift Valley. And it's the deepest gash on earth. It's just like a gash cut right into the earth's crust, 1,300 feet deep. And so you're on, what that tells you is that Israel is right there on two tectonic plates. So when you got two tectonic plates that are together, what do you get? Earthquakes. And you have frequent earthquakes. And this is why in Israel you have layers of ruins on top of one another, because they'll build a beautiful city. Like if you go to Bet Shan, which is the biggest archaeological dig in Israel, it is absolutely stunning. It is gorgeous to see. And what you're looking at is the Roman level. Up on the mountain, you can see that was where the Philistines were. That's where they hung the body of Saul and his sons, bodies of Saul and his sons. But down in the valley below it is the Roman level. But on top of it, so an earthquake comes, I don't remember what year, let's say around 250 AD, something like that. It destroys it. And so all these columns are tumbled over, and they're laying around, and the buildings are flattened and leveled, and so people are killed, and a lot of people, they leave and they move. It's just such a massive destruction. But over the course of time, what happens? Other people move in. Poor people move in, and what do they do? What do they build with? They build with the ruins, and where do they build? They build right on top of the layer that has collapsed. And so you've got at Bet Shan, you've got a Philistine level, you've got a Roman level, you've got a Byzantine level from the Byzantine culture, which was Greek. They built on top of the Romans, and then you've got basically centuries of just Israel. I'll tell you how backward it got. They literally lost the wheel. You think about that. Centuries after the invention of the wheel, they lost it. That's how backward it got in Israel. They literally lost the wheel. There's a whole layer in which we find no wheels of any kind. They just simply lost the know-how. And man, that's dark. That's dark. So, but here they are, people that don't even have the wheel, and they're taking stones that were crafted by really master craftsmen centuries earlier, and they're making it to build their little house and stuff. So that Great Rift Valley is really important because it tells you there are earthquakes, and there are just lots and lots of earthquakes in Israel over the course of history that destroys a lot of stuff, and that's why that's so important. All right, so if you just get that image in your mind, all right, so you got the Mediterranean over here, the coastal plain here, and this is where Joppa is right there, Ashdod. Down here's Gaza. You hear a lot about the Gaza Strip, and that's Gaza down there. It's really desolate and dry. Up here is Caesarea, where Herod gives them a port, and then right here is Mount Carmel. Now, the Carmel is actually a range. It's not just one single mountain. It's a range. It's about 1,500 feet high. And so it juts down into this. On one side, as you look to the north off of the Carmel, you see this is in the King James, it's called the Vale of Jezreel, the Valley of Jezreel. And to the north of it, so this is a gorgeous, just beautiful valley, very lush, very fertile. And it is here, this is the most contested piece of land in the history of the world. More battles fought over that right there than anywhere, and this is where Megiddo is. And so the hill of Megiddo is called Har Megiddo, or it comes out, the Greeks pronounced it Armageddon. And that's why John uses the language of Armageddon, because this is where battles are fought, and he pictures the last great battle that will be fought. There are usually dispensationalists believe that it's going to be a literal battle that's fought there. I think that's merely a type. I think the battle is going to be much bigger than that one little piece of land, frankly. But he uses that language of Armageddon to talk about the last battle. And because this is, you've got up here to up this way is Syria, and so you got a trade route that came down across. These are the Golan Heights right here. You hear a lot of Trump recently said official American policy now is to recognize that Israel owns the Golan. Israel captured the Golan in the 1973 war, and so they've had control of them. I have literally been, a few people here with me, have been in the bunkers on the Golan Heights, and from which the Syrians would lob rockets down on Israel. Well, Israel captured that, and they're not going to give it back because it's the high ground overlooking their people down in this valley. And so if you control the Golan, you can really wreak havoc down here in the Jordan Valley, because you just lob rockets all day long. And that's really what they did. So Israel controls it. Israel says, we're not giving it back, it's ours. And President Trump, the first American president who said, yeah, it's yours. And it's amazing to me that for years, literally every presidential candidate of both parties said they favored moving the embassy, the American embassy, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Every single one, both parties, since Reagan. And of course, no one ever did it. Every time they got in office, everybody said, oh, there'll be a war, there'll be a world war over that if you do that. Trump did it, and there was hardly a ripple. And the same thing with the Golan. It's really drawn nothing but a yawn from, all the Arab countries protested it, but that's it. I think keeping the peace over there is more important to them than fighting over the Golan right now, especially since Syria is such a mess. So when you understand the topography, you sort of understand the way battles are fought and why this land is so important. The Golan Heights. By the way, as you're looking at this, you're looking at a map that would probably go, if you put that on Kentucky, let's say that the top of this map is Covington, and the bottom of this map is probably a little bit south of the Tennessee line. So you're not talking about a big country at all. It's a really small country, and yet, man, so much of world history has been dominated by what's happened right here in this little country. So if you get that in your mind, coastal plain, central mountain range. So these are the hills of Samaria right here. The hills of Judea is where David is a boy and tends to his sheep in the Judean hills. And so if you're on that central mountain range, and by the way, you see Jerusalem is right here in the middle. So on a clear day in Jerusalem, you can easily see the Dead Sea. You're looking down at the Dead Sea. On a really clear day, you might be able to see the Mediterranean 30 miles away. So, not a big country, but man, a lot goes on. Over here on the eastern side of the Jordan is modern day Jordan right here. There's Amman right there. And so in the Bible, this is called Moab or Edom. And it's over here further to the west is the great Arabian desert. And so frequently you'll be in Israel and it'll be really hazy, and that's sand blowing off of the great Arabian desert. And so it affects their weather and their air purity and all that, and has for all of history. All right, so get that map in your mind. If you think of Israel, north to south, you've got Mount Hermon in the north, then the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea in the Jordan Valley. You got the central mountain range with the Galilee and the hills of Galilee. That's where Nazareth and all those towns are. And then you come down across the Vale of Jezreel. You go back up the Mount Gerizim, and you've got the hills of Samaria here. Eventually you come to Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron, where Abraham and Sarah are buried. And then down here is the Negev. Over here is the coastal plain. Just get that in your mind, and every time you read the Bible and it tells you a place, okay, where is this? Is this on the coastal plain, Central Mountain Range, or the Jordan Valley, or somewhere else? Is it in the north? Is it in the south? Is it near Galilee? Is it near the Dead Sea? And you get those things in your mind, and it helps you understand what's going on in the story. All right? Now, let's come to Jerusalem. And I want to lay out Jerusalem for you. As I do this, I want to recommend another couple of books to you. So I recommended the IVP Atlas of Bible History. The other thing that every student of the Bible needs to get is a good Bible handbook. And there are a lot of good Bible handbooks. A good Bible handbook, it just goes, it's arranged canonically. So if you're studying the Song of Solomon, and it reads like it talks about the turtle doves, and you go, okay, wonder what a turtle dove looked like. In a good Bible handbook, it's going to show you pictures of the things that are being mentioned: pomegranates, turtle doves, what a deer looks like there. Here's the way a ancient Near Eastern woman would have been attired, like in the Song of Solomon. It's just going to give you information, that context. This one happens to be the New Lion Handbook to the Bible, but I bought this in Europe. In the United States, it's published by Zondervan. So the Zondervan Handbook to the Bible is great. And man, here's a book my guide in Israel recommended to me that I have absolutely loved. And it's an atlas, but it's centered around Bible biography. So the big characters of the Bible, and it shows us where those characters lived and where they traveled, and it's called Greatness, Grace, and Glory. Greatness, Grace, and Glory by Paul Wright. If I'm not mistaken, it's really hefty in price on Amazon. Again, I was able to pick it up in Israel, and but it's a great book. I don't know. I didn't look and see what the current price is, but I think it's an expensive book, but it's one of those that's really, really worth it. So these are the kinds of books you want to get. I tell my students at Southern, like, don't spend your money on buying sets of commentaries. They're real spotty. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. But you want are reference books, the kinds of things you're going to return to over and over and over. And a good Bible handbook, an atlas, something that gives you manners and customs. That's the kind of thing you're going to go to over and over. And so when you read, let's say we're reading in Luke's gospel about where Jesus is tried in the house of Caiaphas, and then where he's taken and the route he goes and all that, you need a good map of Jerusalem in the time of Christ to see it. So here's an overview, and I want you to see the layout of the town. Now, originally, Jerusalem is one little area about 12 acres big. And it's that right there. That's called the City of David. And so it's coming down the side of a hill. Now, it's hard for you to see the topography here. But Jerusalem is often, its symbol is the Hebrew letter Sheen, which is their S sound, or SH sound. And it sort of, to us, I mean, it looks like almost like a trident. It's got three points. And it's because Jerusalem has three main valleys. And the valleys are, here's the Kidron Valley. This is called the Tyropian Valley right there. And then this is the Valley of Gehenna. And so those three valleys together look like the Hebrew letter Sheen. And so that sort of becomes the symbol of Jerusalem. And you find it in ancient things where it's used to signify Jerusalem. So the city of David lay on between these two valleys, the Tyropian Valley goes right there. The Tyropian Valley, which basically means is the valley of the cheesemakers. And that's where they made cheese. And the Kidron Valley, the brook Kidron, very, very important, and it comes up a lot in the Bible. This mountain on this side of the Kidron is the Mount of Olives. And so the Garden of Gethsemane is right here where Jesus prays. So, excuse me, I need to move that up. It's really like right here because it's just across from the temple and up a little bit. So let me give you a little context here. So in the time of David, this one little ridge right here that's the city of David. It's only about 12 acres. David numbers the people against God's wishes. And for this, God sends a plague. Remember that? And David, he sacrifices to stay the plague. And he does that at the threshing floor of Araunah. And that's up here on what is the Temple Mount. So David, remember, Araunah offers to give it to him. And David said, no, I'm not going to offer to the Lord that which cost me nothing. So he buys the sacrifice and he buys the threshing floor. And then that becomes the site where he plans to build the temple. Since he's bought Araunah's threshing floor, he says, it's not right that I live in a palace and we've got a tent for God. So I'm going to build a temple there. And you know the story. Nathan the prophet says, have at it. That's a great plan. I mean, Nathan's a good Baptist preacher, and they love building programs. And he says to David, you do it. Do what's in your heart to do. But as Nathan's going back to his house, the Lord taps him on the shoulder and says, hey, Nathan, I didn't tell David to do that. You go back and you tell him he can gather the stuff to do it, but I'm not going to use him to build it. There's going to be a son of David's who will build the temple, and he will always sit on the throne. Okay, now God is doing what God frequently does, and he's talking into already, not yet. He's talking about Solomon, the son of David, immediate son of David, but he's also talking about Jesus, the greater son of David. He's talking about the temple that Solomon's going to build right there on the threshing floor of Araunah, but he's also talking about the living temple that the greater son of David is going to build that knows no limits. And so this is how that's how the temple gets located there. And by the way, let me just remind you, all right, Gethsemane, the Garden of Gethsemane is an olive press. So olive presses and wine presses are always by a flowing stream, because once you crush the grapes or the olives, Then you've got all the waste. And so they have a sluice that they open that they can then wash those skins out into the creek, as we call it. There it's the brook, Kidron, and then it will carry them away. So that's why but a threshing floor is always up on the mountain. So when you thresh wheat, it's up on top because you've got a breeze to separate the chaff from the wheat. Remember, the first time we see Gideon is down in the wine press threshing wheat. So to a first century, or even before that, an ancient Near Eastern reader, they would go, "What? You're not supposed to be threshing wheat in a wine press. You don't get any breeze there." And right here in Jerusalem, you could see both things illustrated. So the wine press is down in the brook Kidron, and the olive press, and the threshing floor of Araunah was up on the very top part, Mount Zion, also known as, what's it called in Genesis, where Abraham goes at Moriah. Mount Moriah in Genesis is the same as Mount Zion here. This is where Abraham offers Isaac, or is willing to offer Isaac. It's where David buys the threshing floor of Araunah. Incredible piece of history. Now, Jewish tradition, which is not biblical, but the Jews say that this is Mount Zion is the rock from which God created the world. Now, I'm not even sure how that works, but that's what they say, and they will tell you that to this day, that it is from here that God created the world. So they see that Mount Zion is the foundation of the world. All right. Now, in the time of Jesus, you've got to know the way that the city is laid out. Over here, on this side, this is Herod's. Herod the Great had built that as his complex, and I don't know if you can see these towers. But the towers there he named for his wife Miriam, whom he killed, his brother Fazael, who committed suicide in prison, and then another of his sons. So you've got 3 towers that Herod builds in tribute to the people who always around him die, and his palace is there. So in the time of Jesus, Herod's son lives there, and over here is, right here is Hezekiah's a pool. So remember a couple weeks ago when we talked about the history, the priestly tribe that Herod married into were the Hasmoneans. So the Maccabees and all that. So their palace is right here. And the pool of Bethsaida is here, and the pool of Bethsaida has 7 porches. That's there, and the pool of Siloam has only recently been discovered. It's not even actually on here. Within the last several years, it's been discovered, and it's right here. You see, there's a street that goes right up there. That street just got reopened this month. They've excavated it, and for the first time in 2,000 years, that street is open. I mean, since AD 70, and again, when the Romans destroyed the city, they pretty much destroyed that. And the pool of Siloam is right up in here, and so they have discovered that and lots of stuff there. So you can actually now walk up this road. This is the way. This is the road that, say, the Ethiopian eunuch would have come up. He would have passed the pool of Siloam. Usually at the pool of Siloam is where you would make your contribution of alms to the poor. So as you're going to the temple, so there's lots of beggars on that road. So as you go into the temple, you want to have just done your good deed for the day. This is important. Jews believe you have to do a good deed every day. And so that's why they would give alms, and that's why you always have alms beggars at the gates to the temple, like at the Gate Beautiful in the book of Acts. And so the Ethiopian eunuch would have come up there and to go to the temple. He would not have been allowed in. But that's the route that pilgrims always took. So you would come from anywhere in the country or the world, and you would take this approach. and then you would get to the south wall steps of the temple. Now that's what I want to look at now. So here's the temple, and we're looking at this. So this is from the model city at the Israel Museum. They actually have a beautiful scale model of the city of Jerusalem in the time of Jesus. And this is Herod's temple. And you're looking at it from the perspective of the Mount of Olives. So you're looking at it from the eastern side. So to get your bearings a little bit, right here, this gate is the gate called Beautiful, or the Eastern Gate. And this is where in the book of Acts, James or Peter and John are going in there, and the guy is begging. Remember, because you got to give your alms before you go into the temple. And they say, silver and gold have I none, such as I have give I thee. You rise up and walk. And they heal him, and that causes a lot of turmoil from that point on. And that's the gate Beautiful. By the way, today, this is a Muslim cemetery there, because the Muslims know that there's a prophecy that the Messiah will come in through the Eastern Gate. And if they put graves there, remember, to be ceremonially clean, you can't go near a corpse. So the Muslims have put a cemetery there so the Messiah cannot fulfill the prophecy of coming through the Eastern Gate. Now, I will say, first of all, that prophecy's already been fulfilled. Jesus went through the Eastern Gate many times. So the Messiah has done that. And if he wants to go through there again, those graves won't stop him. I'm confident of that. So, but that just shows they take those prophecies very seriously. So that's the gate Beautiful. Over here, these are the south wall steps. Is the only those steps are still there. It's my favorite thing, I think, in Israel. I take my group there every time. We sit on those south wall steps. This was the main entrance to the temple. And Jesus would have walked up those steps many times. And there are two doors. If you look here, there are two doors. I'll come back to this. Let me see if I can. All right, here is a view of the south wall steps here. So if you're going in, you would walk up these steps and go in right here through what's called the triple gate. And then you would come out this side, this way. If you're in mourning, you go against the flow of traffic. So you wear your signs of mourning, and you go in the exit, and you come out the entrance, so that you can be comforted. So people see you're in mourning, and they comfort you and assure you of their prayers and things. So this is the south. These are the south wall steps. They're still there. It's amazing because this all got torn down. But during the Crusades under Saladin, they rebuilt this, and they put these posts back in place, and they're still there. So again, when they rebuilt during the Crusades, during the Muslim occupation for centuries, they used some of those same materials, and you can still see parts of it today. Let me go back to our overall temple view. So, okay, this part right here, you can see these towers sticking up. This is called the Antonia Fortress. So that's where the Roman governor and so this would be Pilate's headquarters, right there, and where the Roman soldiers were garrisoned. So temple soldiers were allowed to have power within the temple, but not really outside. Roman soldiers stay up here overseeing it just in case things get out of hand. They swoop down and straighten things out. And that is a real insult to the Jews, that Herod, when he builds the temple, he includes this Antonia fortress. By the way, it's named for Mark Antony, of Antony and Cleopatra, because Antony was Herod's patron, and he backed him in the original civil war there in Rome. Mark Antony loses. Remember, I told you how Herod makes a beeline to Rome to tell Octavian or Caesar Augustus, I'll be on your side like I was on his. But he does not change the name of the Antonia fortress. So that's sort of the layout. And the book of Acts talks about the colonnades. So this is the colonnades, and here's where the money changers were. And Jesus would have cleansed the temple there, because as you went in, the money changers are there. So I've got some coins in my office I could show you. So Roman coins all have somebody's head on them, a human figure on them, right? So here's the like Caesar Augustus or whoever the emperor might be at the time. But remember the second commandment: you can't have any graven image. So when you go into the temple, you can't pay your temple tax with any coin that's got an image on it. So they had Hebrew coins that had an olive branch or a grapevine on them, and the Star of David, things like that. But there's no image of any living thing, no human thing. And so you go to the money changers, and you change your money so you can pay your temple tax, and you can buy your sacrifice right there. It's sort of one-stop shopping. And these guys have turned it into a profit business instead of, so they've made the worship of God just pro forma. It's just, just make it convenient. And there's no thought about the sacrifice. There's no thought about what the temple tax means. It's just like, hey, just pay your money and go. And it's this that Jesus, that he objects to. So, sort of the layout of the temple. So they would come up the south wall steps, and then there are stairs that come, covered stairways that come in. There was a bridge on this side, I'll show you here in a minute, that comes from the upper city of Jerusalem. Here's the Antonia fortress. Now look at the layout. So over here's the court of Gentiles. Gentiles are allowed here, but no further. And at every different part, there's a greater forbidding. Only certain people can go past this point. So you got the Gentiles' courtyard, but they can't go in here. And so here you've got the women's courtyard. Jewish women can go in this far, but then there's a line here beyond which they can't go. Only men can go. And then even Jewish men can't go past here. This is the priest courtyard. Only the priest can go in here. And then in here, this is the holy place. Only the high priest can go in there, and only one day a year. So you've got, we sort of call this whole thing the temple. But really, the temple proper is this. This is all the temple courtyard. This is the temple. And so the Ark of the Covenant was supposed to be in there. And we really don't know had they remade it. We don't know when the Ark of the Covenant disappears for sure. A lot of stuff gets carried off when Babylon destroys Jerusalem in 586 BC. But they had to have had something in there even in the time of Jesus, but it's all gone. So here's a view, again, looking over. So here's the temple right here, and you're looking. These are often, the gates into this are also called the Hulda gates. So you come in through the Hulda gates. My grandmother's name was Hulda, so I always like to think about the Hulda gates. This is looking at the model city. And I show you this because if you go to this is the Western Wall, right? Today in Jerusalem, if you go with me to Israel in November, you'll see this little part still sticking out, and you can see the stones of this collapsed, and we will walk on this street. This street has been somewhat restored. It got destroyed by the Romans in AD 70. We see the marks of the heat. They literally burned the rocks. They were able to, I mean, there's stuff you can put on there that heats it up to like 3,000 degrees, and it softens the rocks and changes them and makes them unstable. And they did that in order to tear it down, but then you've got earthquakes on top of that. But this is called Robinson's Arch, and this is Wilson's Arch. And there are remnants of those still today. This is just a model of it. And here you see Robinson's Arch and Wilson's Arch. And so this is the Western Wall. So right here, this is, again, remember this is a model, a reconstruction. What is often called the Wailing Wall or the Western Wall is this little spot right here. So really all that's left of the temple, remember Jesus said not one stone will be left on top of another. And that's exactly what happened. So the temple is gone. This is really just a retaining wall, and part of it is still there, and part of it is underground. We actually go up in a tunnel. The parts that are exposed to the elements are worn badly, but the parts that have been underground for 2,000 years are pristine. You can always tell a Herodian stone by the little lip that they put on the outside of it. And those that have been underground for 2,000 years, that lip is perfect still. It's been protected from the elements just by being underground. So here's just the south wall steps we looked at. Now here's what it looks like today. You've got so this is called the Temple Mount, and over here is the Al-Aqsa Mosque. If you know anything about your Middle Eastern history, remember King Hussein of Jordan. His son Abdullah is now the king of Jordan. So when King Hussein was a little boy, he was in the Al-Aqsa Mosque with his grandfather, and he saw him get assassinated. And so it's really some strange quirk of fate they didn't kill him because he was an heir. So that's the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Dome of the Rock, we used to be able to go in there. Now they don't let non-Muslims go in there anymore. I've been in there. And there's a big rock underneath that is believed to be the rock on which Abraham was offering Isaac. And it is the rock on which the priest offered the lambs for the temple. So this is the Dome of the Rock is there. The Muslims believe this is where Muhammad ascended into heaven from here, from that rock. But he came back. Jesus ascended and is coming back. Muslims believe that Muhammad ascended and then immediately came back. So you can see see here's the Muslim cemetery, right? Here's the brook Kidron. The street goes right along the brook, and this is here's the Kidron Valley. Here's a model of that. This is the south wall. Now, if you've really been paying close attention, you'll see something. I showed you on one model, they have a triple gate here and a double gate here. The model at the Jerusalem Museum just has exactly identical gates. So we're really not sure. There's a difference of opinion about it, but we've learned more since they built this model back in the late 60s, I think. We've learned a lot more, so this is not exactly accurate, but that's what that south wall looks like. Just to show you the size of the temple, all right? This little blue dot right here represents, that's 96 feet. That's the U.S. Capitol Dome. Picture how big the U.S. Capitol Dome is. Over here, this is the temple complex. the Temple Mount, right? You can see the U.S. Capitol Dome is a little dot compared to the size of the temple complex. This is the Parthenon. Here's a football field, American football field. The Colosseum in Rome, and this is the Georgia Dome. Which, have they torn down the Georgia Dome? It's gone, but this is how big it was. And you can see that the temple complex is huge. Now the temple itself is pretty small, right? So this is where atonement is made, sacrifice is made, but the complex is pretty big, and Herod does it upright, all right? So if you noticed on that model of Jerusalem, you got all those houses surrounding the temple, and here's a cutaway of what a house might have looked like. Kevin Ezell preached from Mark recently on Magnificent Monday. He talked about them taking the roof apart. So that roof is made of dirt and chalk, and they're able to, to make it where they reinforce it typically where you could go up there. This is one of the things they did to cool down and to get a breeze. They would go up there. You always see this ladder. In fact, it was a law in the Old Testament. You had to build a fence around the top of your roof so people wouldn't fall off. But it's not unusual that that you could take a roof apart, right? It's made of earth and chalk. And here's the way. This would be a typical house. You've got animals down below. Stable. There's a cistern where you have to bring water and fill that, but it's a small cistern, probably 50 gallons or so that you would keep on hand. But the woman goes in the morning and she goes in the evening to draw water, and whatever she does not use goes in that cistern. You got to keep water for droughts, and people sleep around here. You've got it doesn't show it here, but little niches cut into the walls where you would put your little clay lamp with olive oil in it and a wick, and you burn those. You stick those in those niches at night, and for about 3 hours of darkness before you go to bed, you would burn oils, and so you would have a lot of soot on the walls in these houses. Here's a triclinium. So the way you eat is not at all the way we eat. And man, having been to Korea and eaten, sitting down at a table like this, I realize if you don't do this your whole life and you start trying to do it when you're old, you're in trouble. Because Tanya and I went to this all-night prayer meeting in Korea, and there wasn't a chair in the room. Everybody's sitting on the floor. 80-year-old women sitting there cross-legged, listen to the preaching, and of course they see these two white people walk in there and they go, "Hey, you Westerners, you need chairs." And Tanya and I are big on wherever we are, we try and do whatever they do. Well, it was a mistake. It was a big mistake. We said, "Oh no, we don't need chairs." 10 minutes in, I'm dying. I mean, I'm dying. I can't sit cross-legged. My legs are just not. I've not kept them limber, and sitting there cross-legged, I'm starting to hurt. My back's killing me. 10 minutes in, I'm going to, "Hey, bring that chair." And there we are, sitting in two chairs above a sea of Koreans sitting on the floor while the preacher's preaching. It felt really weird. Well, the same thing, the way they ate at a table, this is a triclinium, which simply means, our word recline, klino is the Greek word for to lie. And so a triclinium is a table on which you lie on three sides. And you can see here, this is really what the Last Supper looked like. It wasn't like the painting that you normally see, one big table. It is three sides. And so Jesus, John and Judas were beside Jesus, Peter over here, the other disciples around the table, and they literally lie on the floor. So if you're lying on the floor up to that table, you put your legs out behind you, and the guy beside you, his legs are behind you, and he's up to the table just like you are, but you're sort of on his chest. So if John is beside Jesus, when he looks at Jesus, he's always leaning back on Jesus' chest. So he's the disciple who leaned on Jesus' chest. And this is also what it means and when Jesus tells the story of the rich man and Lazarus. And Lazarus is taken to where? Abraham's chest. The point is he gets to sit by Abraham in the kingdom. He gets the seat of honor right by Abraham. He's at Abraham's chest. So that's not, people have tried to make that some weird compartment in Hades or Sheol or something. No such thing. It just means exactly what the word means. He's carried to Abraham's chest. And so when you picture them eating in the Bible, this is the way that they're arranged at a triclinium. And there was a definite pecking order about where you sat. So Jesus says, if you go into somebody's house, you don't sit here. This is the seat of honor, all right? And they would serve beginning here. You put your person of honor right here, and you typically put like host beside them. And Jesus said, you take the place of low honor. And then if they tell you, no, by all means, move up here, then fine. But if you sit here and they say, no, you need to move down, Jesus said, that's not good. So they knew exactly where they were supposed to sit. It revealed a social status, and that's the triclinium. The other thing I just really quickly wanted to see you talk about crucifixion, different ways that the Romans crucified people. This is the one we picture right here. That's almost certainly not exactly correct. Notice wasted wood. And that part sticking up the top is pretty much wasted wood. What they would do is you'd have a stake here that they might even leave those just in the ground, just leave them there. And then when you crucify the guy to I forget the name of it, like a tibulum or something like that, basically a crossbar, then you lift him up and set it down on that stake. And you're not going to put him way up high. We sing on a hill far away. It wasn't far away. They did it right by the road. They did it where they just need to get him off the ground where, they can't touch the ground. They're not going to waste wood. For one thing, there's just not that many trees there. And they're going to use as little wood as they need, and they want it to be right by the road where people travel, so that the whole point is to intimidate the local population. And that's the way they did it. We have evidence that when they drove the nail through the feet, it's through the side of the ankle. And so here you can see it could be like this one, where they're crucified to that crossbar, and they turn their legs sideways and go through the side of the ankle into the stake. Or they could do it this, where basically they're hanging a leg on each side of that stake and going in that way. We do know they sometimes crucified upside down. History says Peter was crucified upside down. There's a really early Christian tradition that Peter asked to be crucified upside down, or said it wasn't worthy to be crucified like Jesus, so they crucified him upside down. But the whole point is to make them asphyxiate. You stretch them out, like you can see, to twist those arms like that behind that thing and then nail them in. You're stretching the lungs where you can't breathe, and they just, over the course of hours, they're unable to aspirate, and they die. And if they live too long, they come along, they break their legs so they can't push up. So it's a particularly cruel way to die. This is actually right here, that is the only physical evidence we have of crucifixions from the time of Jesus. And they really did find this in a tomb. And you can see this is an ankle bone. So this right here is a plaster, it's basically a suggestion for what it looked like if you had the whole foot. So that's not real on the left, but that bit on your right is real. That's the only physical evidence we have of crucifixion, and it's going in through the side of the ankle. Now we have a lot of literary descriptions of crucifixion. Josephus and others talk about it, but they don't tell us exactly like where they put the nails and that kind of thing. But you can trust the Romans. They did it in the cruelest, most hideous way possible. They knew exactly when they whipped someone, they knew how to do it and exact the most pain and blood without actually killing them. And they were experts at it. You feared them, and that's how you maintain control. If you're an occupying force, you just make everybody scared to death of you, and you make them pay a price if they oppose you, and that's exactly what they did. So again, just things like this show us, help us understand the Bible. Right there, that is a first century tomb, and that is up near Megiddo. When we leave Megiddo, we come down back to so that's actually in the valley of Jezreel, but this dates to the first century. You can see it's got a stone that rolled over. It's got a little, basically a track in which that stone rolls, but you can see that no one person is going to roll that stone by themselves, and certainly even like two women aren't going to do it. And as they're going to the tomb early on that Sunday morning, they're saying, who's going to roll the stone? And when they got there, the stone was not a problem. So a lot of stuff today, everything from geography to just these typical practices, but they're very, very important in the New Testament for us to understand what's going on. It's a culture that is removed from ours, but it is the one in which the Lord chose to reveal himself in the person and the work of Jesus Christ. So it's very, very important that we learn all we can so we understand it exactly as the authors intended us to do. And thanks for coming with me today and entering the world of the New Testament.